Well, welcome to our final WestGrid Town Hall of the year, and looking forward to Christmas. The usual details, just to the admin details here. So video, you can click the hand item if you've got any icon, if you've got any questions. And of course, video users, if you can mute when you're not speaking, just to make sure we don't get any extraneous noise, that would be much appreciated. Anything else you need to note? Aaron, you can ask questions. Break in whenever. Good. Okay. Let's say welcome to our town hall. We've got a number of things to cover. I thought it might be nice, too, to start off with a little bit of just a single slide looking back on what's happening in the previous year. And then mostly things about the plans for the new systems, where they're all going, some updates and such. So just a bunch of little notes. It's been a really, really busy year, of course, with the new systems coming in, old systems going out, and for everybody at WestGrid and Compute Canada, a lot of work involved in trying to get everything up and running. So we got the Arbutus Cloud, Cedar and Graham, and I'll note things like also involved in that were major facilities upgrades, new power, new cooling, new hardware, getting it all in, plus all the admin details of trying to get the RFPs out and trying to work with lots and lots of purchasing departments and all that kind of thing. And then the software. So a whole ton of work there. And I really want to mention the sysadmins across WestGrid. It's been a really collaborative effort. Things like I put a couple of notes there on the system support, that monitoring, Manitoba's been involved with that, scheduling, U of A, UBC, UCalgary. So a very joint effort in putting these big new systems together. And I think the systems guys are sort of unrecognized a bit because they work in the background. So I will just shout out to those guys and say thanks a lot. I think it's been brilliant this year, and we've got all these new systems up, running, going, and that's a huge effort. Also, of course, got to talk about the user support. We just did the survey, and Aaron will talk about that a bit later on in the presentation. But a lot of great comments for recognizing the support groups. And again, this has been a tough year for support because, we got the new systems. That meant writing lots of new documentation. And the WestGrid support people have been instrumental in that, working closely with the Compute Canada guys, and putting in the new OTRS ticketing system, and just getting familiar enough with the new systems to be able to offer good support. So again, I think I really want to recognize everybody who's been working so hard this year on all this nifty new stuff. And I'll mention then finally for this, the whole migration stuff. That's been kind of on the side. Not only do we has everybody been supporting the old systems, but we've been trying to migrate various systems, trying to spread it out. So we had things like Hermes or Jasper, Bugaboo, all moving over the summer and into the autumn, and we've still got a few to go. But most of those moves went very well, and particularly, we started with the silo move back in January. Everybody got onto the new petabyte systems. That one went really, really well, and that was difficult because moving petabytes of data around the country is not an easy thing. Yeah, so start with that and just recognize everybody and say great stuff. And of course, I got to recognize the users too, because users have had to move and move on to new software, new distribution systems. And it looks to me, I've got some statistics later on in the talk, that that most of our users are really putting a big effort into doing that move and have got used to the new systems. So you've seen this slide before, but it's just to nail it, a couple of extra little bits in blue. So Cedar's up at SFU, almost 30,000 cores. There is a major stage 2 storage and compute expansion in process. That'll actually double the number of cores. So it's a big one, and deliveries are just beginning to start. So and that should be relatively straightforward. It's adding straight CPU nodes onto the Cedar system. So, so we're relatively confident that that'll be up and running in the next couple of months. So great news there. Graham, they're working on a storage expansion, and they're not adding any more cores. And Niagara, that's that new large parallel system in Toronto, and that'll be something on the order of 60,000 cores. It's ordered. Racks are being delivered right now, and they seem to be on track for acceptance on February 1st. So again, really good news there that that whole purchasing operation is going ahead just as planned. GP4, that's the new general purpose system in a French-speaking province. And that RFP is almost complete. It'll probably go out in January. Great stuff. And that'll be another Cedar Graham kind of machine. Lots of discussions. I think we mentioned that we had Greg Newby, the CTO of Compute Canada, talk about that system at our last town hall. So that is going ahead, and we're looking forward to getting that one too. So great stuff there. The cloud systems too, got to mention them. Arbutus is also undergoing a big additional increase. The new storage is really seriously needed. I think in the whole new system end of things, our big miscalculation was around the storage on Arbutus. So the Arbutus guys, Ryan Engie at UVic is the lead on the Cloud National team, and he's been pushing hard to really get that storage up and running. So we've got probably another 2 petabytes of additional storage on that, and more nodes. And I'll have a bit more to say about that. And I just mentioned he reminded me this morning that a database as a service, DBAAS, is one of the things that Compute Canada is funding. So that'll be great. We get a lot of requests for database as a service, essentially pretty standard SQL databases that our users can use, can create their own databases in there. SFU has already got that and has had it for some years. It's well used, although not very well advertised. I have a bit more to say about that too. And then the other one, the Cedar and Graham cloud partitions, nothing new there. They're either underdeveloped, Graham is in operation, and it's available on request. And really nothing new on the data. Oops, getting some feedback from somebody there, thanks. The National Data Cyber Infrastructure, okay. The storage at Cedar and Graham are up and running. Some playing around with the project configuration and how that's shared, but I think that's now pretty well defined. Users are in there. It's all backed up to tape. It's working fine. The nearline is not there yet, but we'll get there. And then I did want to just mention these legacy what I call legacy services, the database service at SFU and the own cloud service at SFU. And just questions we've been getting the last few weeks are since they're at SFU and Bugaboo is going to be defunded, are these services going to go away too? And no, that's not correct. These are independent services. They are not dependent on Bugaboo, and they will continue on. And as just mentioned, the database service is going to be formalized, and new hardware nodes have been purchased to increase that service and make it a bit more serious. They were on some old systems. That will require a migration. We'll have to move from the old servers to the new stuff, but we're not there at the point of actually knowing when that'll happen. So we'll inform everybody later on, I think, in the winter when we're ready to go on that one. Own Cloud has already been moved to a new storage system, and I don't think anybody noticed. That was a great move on SFU's part, just to move the underlying storage. There is an old server that'll need replacing, and but no plans yet. So those two services will keep going, just to reassure everybody. And thought I'd just have a little bit of fun, being the last. The last town hall of this year. Here is a graph of some of the Cedar CPU usage. So we're beginning to get these statistics now, getting all the monitoring systems going. And here it is from back in August on the left-hand side of the graph and extending out to now. And you can certainly see right in the middle that big outage that we had a few weeks ago in Cedar. That was the first major outage, and essentially reconfiguring a lot of the bits and pieces after the experience for the first few months. And you can kind of see there's a nice little ramp up. The colors, you probably can't read them, but that's pulled out in discipline. So the blue down at the bottom is chemistry, and the light blue is engineering. Green is biological and life sciences, and up it goes from there. So I thought this was kind of interesting. It looked like that right away, you'll notice that the blue parts, the chemists, is very high. So that's great. That sounded to me like the chemists sort of dived in with all these big off-the-shelf codes, and they could start running right away. The engineers, and those are the light blue, that's more the CFD kinds of codes. Looks like they took a little while to get going. You can see that back in August and September there wasn't much use, but now they're a big chunk of the overall pattern. And of course, a general increase in usage. I just noted that don't worry too much about the far right-hand side where it seems to be going down. That's just because the statistics need to know when jobs ended, and jobs haven't ended yet. They're just getting too close to the current time. But that peak there, around about 23,000 cores usage. And remember, on Cedar there are about 27,000 in total. So 22,000 cores active all the time, or equivalents. That's actually pretty good. There are always overheads, and in particular, there are scheduling inefficiencies, and this particular thing does not include the GPU use. I should have tried to pull out the GPUs, but I figure that's probably 85, something like that, 85%. And just to notice, if you actually look at the uptime, and as you can see, there's only been really one major down. That's that scheduled one a few weeks ago. Then the uptime's around about 97% at the moment, and we're kind of hoping for a bit more than that, but something around that is pretty good for these big systems. So really nice to see. Here's the number of jobs run. So the scale on the left-hand side there, 60,000 at the top, the linear scale, 60,000 jobs. You can say, yeah, and this is a daily one. So how many jobs submitted per day? So we've got some peaks that are getting up to 50,000 jobs a day. On average, I don't know, 12,000, something like that, 10,000 jobs. Very variable. So sometimes we have users submitting a whole bunch of single core or single node jobs, so the number of jobs submitted boosts way back up. And other times we get fewer of those ones, and we get a few of the larger jobs being submitted. So yeah, kind of what you'd expect, and again you can see the ramp up from back in August, and now kind of consistent. I didn't manage to get the actual length of the queues, which is a measure of how busy the system is, but here are the number of jobs in the queue, and again, same kinds of numbers, but very variable. 20,000 jobs in the queue. Remember, we've got essentially 30,000 cores, so 20,000 jobs in the queue is not too bad per day. That's at any time, at average during the day. So again, we're really seeing use. We're seeing the boot back up here. Kind of interesting, the physics, you'll see that light blue on the right-hand side. That's the physics. And those are lots and lots of single-core jobs as they suddenly boot up. And that's probably more the Atlas end of things, the Atlas jobs, because they're inclined to run a whole bunch of single-core or single-node jobs. And they have automated ways of working with whatever resources there are. So yeah, so every now and again they submit a whole bunch of those high-energy physics analysis routines. And here are the number of jobs by node. On the x-axis is just histograms of the number of nodes, 1 node, 2 node, 3 node, up to 256 node jobs. And you can see that that's over the last month or so. Those jobs running in one node, so not distributing across multiple nodes. By far, that little green bar on the left, a little hugely green bar, so 65,000 jobs are single node jobs using a few cores. And then we have some of those bigger users who are submitting, well, the largest one, I think only 256 nodes. But gives you some idea of the way things are working on these general purpose systems. Say most of our users running those smallish, by the standards of the whole system, jobs. But a few of those users know what they're doing. Here's a heat map, just showing over days. See, that starts November 13th, November 12th, of the number of cores per job. And again, you can see the same thing here. I'm using the Grafana system that Compute Canada's provided for our monitoring analysis, and I'm not quite sure if gray on or black on gray is really a good color scheme for some of this stuff. But you can see, I think there's one job right there. So there's a 2,000 core job that was running back on the 16th or 17th.
Killed.
Yeah. Yeah. And most jobs, yeah, there they are. Most of them are in that 32 core range, that single core jobs, with a few extending over more cores, but most of them in that single core. So yeah, so we're getting these numbers, we're beginning to analyze them, and beginning to understand how these general purpose machines like Cedar are being used. Scheduling, I think, as usual, scheduling is one of the places where we get our most complaints. It's always an art, and while we attempted to get these big machines in reasonably consistent, well, we've got thin nodes with not too much memory, fat nodes with lots of memory, things in between. We got nodes with GPUs. We've got jobs that go from those single core out to distributed ones. We've got run times that go from minutes to weeks, a lot of them. And of course, we got our priorities. There are default users, there are rack users, RPP users. So you can't really satisfy everybody, but you can certainly play around. And one of the big things that happened on the Cedar outage a few weeks ago was to rejig the Slurm scheduler configuration. That was because one noted that quite a lot of the non-rack, the larger non-allocated jobs were not running. Got a lot of complaints about that one. And it turned out that just the way the scheduler was set up, the smaller, easy-to-schedule jobs just kept taking all the resources that were available, and the scheduler never put aside resources for these jobs waiting in the queue. And they're quite a major effort in redoing that. Yeah, so a point there, and I think everybody noted that earlier this week, Monday and Tuesday, Graham was down for 2 days, and that was the same thing. They were down for the same updates, and they switched over to the new scheduling scheme as well. So it's great to have our statistics now, where we can look at these in some detail and see how the scheduler is going. I would say that if there are any issues with scheduling, your jobs really aren't starting, right away send a message to us. We really want to know that kind of thing and try to find the best compromise on the scheduler priorities. And then having talked about Cedar and Graham, of course our Butus is going strong too. And here are some overall stats for our Butus. The gray is the total number of available virtual CPUs, and the green is the actual use, the green line. So yeah, there's always some variability in the number of virtual CPUs available, So that gray space goes up and down a little bit, but it's pretty even now. This is, by the way, for the whole year from January to now. You can see that use has been creeping up and is now kind of nicely evened out for the last few months. Quite a lot of that is actually, again, the astronomers and the high-energy physicists just using up whatever compute capacity there is. They can submit jobs to anything. And a smaller chunk is the actual persistent platforms and portals that are being ramped up and being built, which is kind of nice to see. I should note that for clouds, memory is always a problem. We can over-allocate cores, and especially when you're running a web server which doesn't have a huge number of hits, you just might see a slightly slower response. But memory, you need memory, and you define it early on. So our usual factor is the memory, and I think that's kind of what we're seeing there. So all good here, and that number of 15,000 cores available, that's after hyperthreading, and when the new cores get installed, will be up around 20,000 cores, and plus the partitions on Cedar and Graham for special purposes. So I'm just going to mention the Arbutus upgrade. That's because this will be a migration issue. So after having run the Arbutus for a couple of years, the guys have learned a lot of lessons, a lot of updates, a lot of things got bolted on along the way. And essentially the idea is to take this opportunity to create a whole new one. So these new cores, something like 1,500 cores will be available. The Cloud National team will create essentially a whole new cloud there in parallel with the existing one. And at that point, we'll migrate users' VMs from the old one to the new one, then shut down the new one and integrate shut down the old one and integrate the hardware into the new one. So this is our sort of usual looking forward approach at our town halls. Hopefully this will happen somewhere in March, and look out there because we'll be sending out detailed instructions and documents to all the users on the cloud for how this deployment or redeployment will occur. Yeah, there's definitely going to be some user effects here. Have to move those VMs, figure out how to get them on the new ones, and set up whatever systems you've got. But we'll be working with the users to help everybody out. Ryan, do you want to add anything there? Ryan, I see he's online. He's yeah, good. Okay, so we got a few more little touch base slides here. There is a known issues page on the Compute Canada wiki. The only one I'll just mention briefly is that I think I mentioned it before, Nearline's not available. So if you got any kind of archival tape requirements, call support, and we can try to figure out how to help you directly. There are various minor technical issues, I think. Most of them are getting solved. So if you want to have a look, go and have a look at the known issues page and see if there's anything that would affect you. I don't think it's worthwhile in this discussion to go into the details. Also wanted to mention that the WestGrid status pages also include Cedar and Arbutus. So for those of you who are kind of used to looking at WestGrid and are on the Twitter feed, all that kind of thing, yeah, we're going to keep updating the WestGrid status pages with Cedar and Arbutus messages. I think SharkNet's doing exactly the same with Graham. So again, also, if you happen to be on Graham and are used to the SharkNet end, go ahead there too. And a quick look at the number of tickets. Nice to start having all these graphs and actually seeing what's going on. These are Compute Canada tickets. So central Compute Canada tickets. Notice the ramp up. That's because many of us are moving towards using the Compute Canada OTRS. So the left-hand side is 2016, and that was when the Compute Canada ticketing system was brought up. And you can see not too many tickets, and that's really ramping up now as we get into 2017, and tickets get moved from the regional ones into the central one. So that's going well. that was, again, a real collaborative effort. WestGrid has a strong presence on the Research Support National Team, which runs the OTRS, and I think, give or take 6 months or so, we'll be moving all our WestGrid tickets onto that system. One thing I will note is if you look at the colors there, there are cloud tickets right at the bottom in a sort of orange. Then comes the green accounts tickets. That's something wrong with your account. Then the purple general purpose tickets, so all the usual ones about what's going on with your jobs. But then comes is that red-orange, reddish one, which is the rack. So you can see that in the last couple of months, we've had an uptick in the number of tickets asking about rack issues. So sure, that makes sense. We've just had the competition. The competition closed a few weeks ago, and yeah, we got a number of questions about rack. What's interesting is if you look back at 2016, in September, October, November, when there was again those rack ones, it's a bit less than there were this year. A bit more than there were this year. So maybe people are getting used to the new rack system. I'm not quite sure if it's statistically significant, but nice to see anyhow. Right, a few notes about migration. So for the WestGrid legacy systems, we got Bugaboo, Orsinus, Grex, and Parallel still in operation. Orsinus, Grex, and Parallel will keep going till March 31st. And it looks like the institutions involved, UBC, Manitoba, and Calgary, will be keeping those systems going, but not as WestGrid or Compute Canada systems. They'll be internal systems. And you can find instructions and details and who to contact about that on that link, the migration process link. I will talk a little bit more about Bugaboo. So Bugaboo was scheduled to be defunded at the end of this month, in a couple of weeks. And the approach there was that the additions to Cedar, the doubling in size, that would give lots of extra space for the Bugaboo users who are still running on Bugaboo. So the idea was to wait until we had the new Cedar stuff and then migrate Bugaboo users. Unfortunately, it looks like we won't get that big new Bugaboo stuff for another couple of months yet. Now, SFU very kindly have fronted enough cash to buy nodes up front for the Bugaboo replacement. That's sort of an early purchase on that phase 2 stuff. Those have been ordered. They're beginning to be delivered, but they're not going to be done in time to move Bugaboo by the end of this month. So the upshot of that is that Bugaboo is going to be keeping going into January. Kind of aiming for January 31st, might be a bit later than that, but as soon as the new nodes come online, get integrated into Cedar, then we need to move the users. The approach at the moment is that those who have allocations, they should use Bugaboo, continue to use Bugaboo until we're ready to absorb their allocations into Cedar, until we get the new nodes. So we'll be moving those when we're ready, and we'll get in contact with all the rack PIs about that move. The non-racks, well, you can start now. This is going to be self-migrated. Cedar is available. Everybody's got accounts on Cedar, and remember that's your CCD, your Compute Canada credentials. And we're keeping the usual 20% or so available for non-rack users, for default users. So go ahead, start getting migrated right away. We'll send out messages, of course, about the actual defunding of Bugaboo, but there's the situation. So I expect you'll see more detailed descriptions coming out mid-January when we know a little more about exactly what the process is going to be. So be on the lookout for that one. There's our next big migration system. We have not really started to talk about migration of the March 31st systems, so we'll get back to you on those ones at the next town hall. Yeah, the rack closed. That was November 16th. We're in the middle of both the technical and scientific reviews right now. And don't have much numbers, of course, because we haven't done any allocations yet. But there's that 2018 number. We've gone from 409 applications last year to 469 this year. So we're still seeing that mostly linear increase in the number of rack applications as we go along. So, and I think, as you know, we're looking next year for pretty much the same total number of cores available. The cores are more capable, they're more modern. So we're not really keeping up with demand at this point, but when GP4 comes online, that'll be a big help. And when so kind of keeping up a bit there. And of course, Compute Canada will be working closely with CFI for hopefully the next round of funding. And just some numbers there, just to emphasize that. On the left-hand side, the CPU, as you can see, the total ask in red is significantly more than the allocatable capacity that we've got. You can't quite see the GPU, the next one, but yeah, we got asked for a lot of GPUs. But when it comes to storage, the blue, the total allocatable capacity, is larger than the red by quite a chunk, so we're good on that line. Oh, sorry. And so we've got storage. That's nice to see. And similarly with the cloud, looks like we're in not too bad shape there. The total ask and the total capacity are similar pretty much across the board. But it is the straight CPUs that gives us the worry. And indeed, the Cedar expansion is just straight cores in order to respond to this kind of data. Well, at that point, I'm kind of done and given a quick overview of where we are at the end of this year. We're still expecting I think a pretty big year next year. We got those new machines coming in, the old machines going out. Again, it's going to be pretty busy, and well, we'll be keeping in touch with everybody. But part of all the preparation is indeed the training and the workshops, and we've done a lot of those this year. Alex is our visualization, our new training coordinator. He's introduced the summer schools, for instance, which were extremely successful. It's hard to do summer schools in such a highly distributed organization as WestGrid, because we got a whole bunch of institutions and provinces. It's a little easier if you're in Toronto and you can have one major summer school and bring in most of the universities. But Alex has been doing a great job. Had UBC and Saskatoon last year, and we'll be doing similar kinds of things, moving these summer schools around. And yeah, I'll hand it over to Alex at this point, and Alex can fill us in on his plans. So over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Patrick. Can you show the next slide, please? Okay, so we are planning a lot of events for training events for next year. So I will start with the online webinars. We decided to start a bi-weekly webinar schedule. So we'll have webinars every second Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Mountain, and noon Central Time. And these will start on January 17th, going towards the end of May. So expect to see something interesting every second week. And sometimes we'll have weekly webinars as well if we have, a scheduled workshop, multi-part workshop, etc. So we'll have the bioinformatics series, 3 webinars presented by researchers from the Genome Science Center here in Vancouver, and also 3 visualization webinars. So these are already scheduled for January, March, and May. At the end of February, early March, we'll have a 3-part parallel programming in Chapel workshop. So these are meant to be interactive. We'll try to we'll develop hands-on exercises, and we'll try to make sure that you can run these exercises, and we'll have feedback from participants. So these are meant to be highly interactive, even though they are online. And we are planning a number of other webinars as well. So these are still confirming with the speakers. And for the up-to-date program, check out training webpage. All information will be posted there shortly. So next slide, please. Okay. We are planning a number of in-person workshops, half-day, full-day workshops next year as well. So we're starting on January 24th at UBC Okanagan in Kelowna. We'll have an advanced parity workshop. So this will be a full-day workshop, And it is meant for somebody who is already a little bit familiar with ParaView, but we'll start slowly. And the idea here is to cover the remote visualization techniques. So if you have a large data set sitting on one of our new systems, for example, on Cedar or Ground, and you want to visualize this data set, it's very large to download to your laptop, or you cannot simply fit it onto your laptop. You can do all rendering remotely. There are many ways of doing this. So we'll cover client-server visualization, debugging client-server visualization, writing scripts, and of course, batch mode visualization, so running renderings completely off-screen as batch jobs. And we'll have a number of exercises hands-on, so already have very large data sets. And so people are welcome to attend not only from Kelowna, but from, I know there will be several attendees from Calgary. And if you are planning on attending, please go and register yourself so that we know that you're coming. So this is going to be a full-day workshop. And then we'll have a usual beginners ParaView workshop sometime in spring, maybe February or March, in Vancouver area, either at SFU or UBC. I still need to confirm the dates. And then mid-May, we'll have a 3-day workshop, series of workshops at University of Northern British Columbia, Prince George. So there I'm bringing ParaView, so usual introduction to ParaView, introductory Python, introduction to HPC, so cluster computing, scheduling, compiling your codes, debugging, and all the usual introductory HPC stuff, and also 1 day of parallel programming in Chapel. And then, as Patrick already mentioned, we are now running annual summer schools. So these will be in June, most likely. We're still not sure, discussing the dates, most likely June. And these are meant to be 4-day events, so in-person events. They will be at UBC again this year and University of Manitoba. And these will be filled with all sorts of sessions: introductory programming, introduction to HPC, parallel programming, domain sessions. So for example, last year at UBC, we actually had 16 classes, 16 half-day classes, and really a large variety of classes that were being taught. So stay tuned, and we'll have more information probably in January with the dates, exact dates of these summer schools. Next slide, please. Okay, so as many of you have heard, this fall we ran a visualization competition. So it was open to everybody, not just from WestGrid, but all researchers in Canada could submit visualizations. It was running for 2 months, so the data set was made available for downloading in early October, and then all entries were due by the end of November. So we had very, very strong submissions, quite a few very strong submissions. We're really surprised. And we are really happy. So we're reviewing all submissions last week, and we are really happy to announce the winners. So the first prize is going to John van der Kalk, postdoc from the University of Ottawa, who submitted a very nice overall very nice visualization with a soundtrack, and he did a lot of research on the turbine. So the data set was of the airflow flowing around vertical turbines. And he did a lot of research on the efficiency of these vertical turbine blades. The second place went to Nadia Moiseva, graduate student from UBC. She created lots of several very good visualizations that she put together in a movie, and really, really nice advanced visualization techniques that we'll be discussing. We'll put them on our website, and we'll also likely have a webinar sometime in January or February on the techniques that were used in these top submissions. And the third place went to a team from University of Toronto and Akat University, so Dan McDonald, Thangam Natarajan, and others, who submitted an interesting visualization. So what they did, they built scientific visualization rendering in ParaView, and then they imported it into a blended game engine for interactive walkthrough, interactive visualization. And they also coupled it to an audio channel that was created live on the fly by a sound server. So you can actually walk around the visualization in the game engine in this virtual world, and then could step into the regions where you have a lot of vorticity, and then these regions will be rendered in audio. So very interesting. We've already put all visualizations online, the movies from these submissions online. So please go and check this webpage. So lots of really interesting techniques, fantastic visualizations. And as I mentioned, we'll be covering the techniques probably in January or February webinar. So that's all for training and visualization. Thank you. You're muted, Patrick.
Oops. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Alex. Yes, that was great. And those visualization things, they were excellent. And it's worthwhile mentioning that we got some really good industry support from Dell and Intel. Some great prizes there. So I think we'll be continuing to have these competitions next year, and even better prizes, maybe. And then the final major section in our town hall is about the user survey. We've been doing these surveys annually, and Aaron, we just got the new one done and got some results there, and Aaron will review them.
Great, thanks, Patrick.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we launched our first major user survey last year in August, and this was a follow-up. So we tried to keep a lot of the questions very similar so we could measure the difference year to year. And we had the first year we were overwhelmed with the responses, and this year was even better. So we got 283 people who responded. And what was more impressive was the number of people who actually took the time to write some really detailed feedback and responses to the questions. And just it's the feedback alone is going to be huge to help us move forward and really help answer some of the pain points for people. So just looking a little bit of the background of who responded, it's about split between some people who have limited experience and those who feel like they're very experienced users with advanced research computing. The majority heard about WestGrid and Compute Canada from a colleague or a supervisor. And the most important services were similar to last year. So long-term storage was ranked a bit more important this year, file sharing services, and then large shared memory machines, which is an area that we're going to be lacking now that Hungabee's offline. So that's something that we're looking into. And we added a new question asking the satisfaction level with WestGrid. It's one of our KPIs we have to report to with our funder CFI. So 90% are somewhat or very satisfied with WestGrid. So respectable, especially given all the transition that's happened in the last year and the lack of cores and the growing pains. So that's good news. On the next slide, just comparing a little bit more with last year, is you can see that 74% of the respondents this year had used support in some form over the last year, so that's up over 2016. And also the awareness of some of the more specialized support that we are providing has increased. So people are slightly more aware of the digital humanities support available, the bioinformatics support, and also the research data management services. So that's really good news, especially bioinformatics. We've been really trying to target that. We heard last year that people were completely unaware that we offered bioinformatics support, and they really wanted to know more. And so we've tried to offer more training sessions, and the UBC ARC team, along with the bioinformatics national team, has worked really hard on getting a help form up. And so it's good to know that users are more aware. And then in terms of how timely the support response is, that metric has gone down slightly from last year. But as Patrick showed earlier, there's just been a big influx in tickets with the new systems coming online. And just as we try to work out the support strategy, the coordination with the new systems and the defunding systems. But still our helpfulness of the support recommendations is actually up from last year. It's 99% found support helpful. And in fact, there was so many tremendous comments from people about the support that our staff have given. And it's really great. That was definitely the one constant is how, although it might take a little bit longer from time to time to get help, that when they do, it's fantastic. So we really appreciate hearing that. And then it looks like the amount of local support that's perceived by users has dropped a little bit. Only 50% feel they have adequate local support. So those are some metrics that we'll look into moving forward, to just how to make sure that users are able to access the support they need, whether it's remote or in person. So we'll provide a bit more of an extensive report coming up, and just stay tuned again. Thank you everyone who took the time to add your comments and fill out the survey. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. Yeah, that's it's a great survey, and still a few bits and pieces that I think we need to address, and we'll be working on those as we go along. So cool. And then a few just final bits and pieces. I think, as everybody knows, WestGrid incorporated 8 months ago. We have an interim board. We're looking for a new board, and the open call is out there. So, and we've actually got quite a few really good applications already. So there's actually quite a lot of interest out there in WestGrid and where we're going in the future, how we're going to fit in with Compute Canada and the national strategy, all those good things. Anyhow, if anybody's really interested, feel free to apply. Compute Canada is undertaking a next version of Spark. That's the user consultation process, sustainable planning for advanced research computing. It seems to be the focus is on what would success look like in the next couple of years, and that's success defined pretty generally. What would users look like? What would staff want to see? What the regions, disciplines, all them want to see. So I think we'll see maybe a virtual town hall where we can come in and make comments in late January. Of course, all this stuff feeds into reports, requests to CFI for the next round of funding and all the rest. So these are really critical. The big original Spark, was it 3 years ago that we did a Spark, and then 2 years ago, which was pretty intense. And that fed into all the requests to CFI for the new cyber infrastructure grants and the new money. So these kinds of exercises are really critical to satisfying the demand in Canada for these kinds of advanced research computing. So I've just got this one slide for now. Start thinking. I think we will see more of this coming up in the next few months, and it would be great if everybody can really take part in any kind of consultation exercises from Compute Canada. So just a heads up on that one. And at that point, I think we're kind of done. Support, our web pages will be closed over the Christmas holiday. Everybody, I hope, will submit long jobs so they don't have to actually get into work over Christmas. Some of us will be around over the Christmas holidays, so if there are issues, we will do our best to find time to answer them. But yeah, don't expect a lot. Yeah, I think that's kind of it. Merry Christmas to everybody. Hope everybody has a good vacation. And that's about it for today. See you in the new year.